Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this Litepanels webinar. My name is Michael Herbert, and I am the product manager for Litepanels. I'm joined today by Tim Duff, technical sales manager for Litepanels as well. Hi, Tim.
How you doing?
All good. Thanks very much for being here with us today. We're very pleased to have the opportunity in a moment as well to talk with British Director of Photography, Joe Ransom, who was the first user of our new Gemini 1x1 Hard. We'll be chatting to him about his experience, getting into details about some of the rigs. So Tim, please feel free to join in and ask questions and whatever as we move through.
Yep, and that goes for everyone watching along. If you do have any questions during the session, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Michael and I will be, monitoring these, and we'll try to cover as many questions as possible. And feel free to put some questions directly into the chat. Our Litepanels team will be monitoring it and be able to answer some questions there as well. So we hope for a lot of interaction, and I think this should be a great session. And, before we're joined by Joe, I'm going to let Michael give a very quick overview of the Gemini Hard itself.
Okay, so I promise this will just be a very quick 2-minute overview. Chances are, if you're on this call, on this webinar, you've probably seen most of these details previously, so I won't spend too much time talking about it, but just a very quick overview of the panel that we've just released of the next evolution of the Gemini series. That is the 1x1 Hard. So this is a 1x1 panel, form factor panel, and it is RGBWW with both tungsten and daylight LED chips, and it's with a 46-degree beam angle. This is how it differentiates itself from the previous 1x1 soft, which actually had a much wider 120-degree beam angle. This has got a much more contracted, more intense beam angle. We'll talk about what that really means in a second. In terms of output, we're up to 3,000 lux, just over 3,000 lux at 3 meters in 5600K. So very, very bright, very, very powerful. So that's actually 5 times brighter than a 1x1 soft. It's twice as bright as an Astra 6X. And for those that are interested, it's about 4 times brighter than an Arri S30 and about 3 times brighter than an Aperture Nova. So in terms of what it's capable of doing, it's got the extended white color temperature range from 2700 Kelvin up to 10,000 Kelvin. So great for matching all different types of lighting, white light when you're on set. And with the 1x1 Hard, we've actually boosted the color accuracy. So we're up to a TLCI and a CRI of 98 on this product. Like I said, full RGBWW color gamut mixing with HSI control, but also individual RGBWW channel control as well for very, very precise color control. We have full plus minus green color correction for whenever you need it. And we've got our secret sauce 0.1 up to 100% flicker-free dimming, any frame rate or any shutter angle. It doesn't matter what you're shooting at, and we'll delve into this in a little bit more detail with Joe later on, but you can really push this thing up to, we're talking literally thousands of frames. There will be no flicker whatsoever. From a control perspective, wired or wireless DMX, RDM, Bluetooth, so multitude of different ways of controlling the product. And all of this is in a really compact package. It's that 1x1 form factor, like I mentioned, but it only weighs 6 kilos or just over 13 pounds. That's including the yoke and the power supply. So this thing is super versatile. It's got the high output. It's really lightweight. It can be used in a multitude of different ways. And we actually include 2 different diffusers as standard with it as well. So you can have it raw, where you just get your max output, or you can have the ultralight diffuser, which will get rid of, which will kind of blend your light that little bit, but not lose too much of the intensity. Or we've got the dome diffuser, or the bubble diffuser, as Joe calls it, to really spread that beam angle out really nice and wide and perfect for lighting larger sort of ambient scenes. But anyway, enough about the specs of the product itself. Kind of the basis of this is to talk about the launch video that we decided to do to support the launch of the product. So we decided the best way to really demonstrate the power and the versatility of the light was to put it to test in production in a real life scenario. The result, as you may well have already seen, is this fast-paced, action-packed short with a twist. That's at the end, that's shot so beautifully by Joe and his team. Before we jump into the conversation, let's just take another look at that video. great. So when we saw that edit for the first time, it vastly surpassed what we expected when we started briefing the project at the back end of last year. And so now it's with great pleasure, we can introduce Joe Ransom for this very British heavy conversation to talk about what happened. So Joe, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, good to see you, Joe. Michael, I'd like to ask the first question if that's okay. So
Absolutely, go ahead.
I wasn't involved with the briefing process, but I really wish I was there to see your reaction. They gave you the brief, right? You know, they didn't exactly make it easy for you. So, you know, pretty broad and open in that, you know, show the versatility of the Gemini 1x1 hard light, right? Per Michael's directive. But the catch is that was all you can use. So you couldn't use any other lights for the entire film. So, I mean, as a director, DP, who I'm sure is used to a lot of great toys at your disposal, I mean, how did you approach this? I mean, you know, and did you actually, you know, stick to the plan, so to speak, or did you cheat a little?
So the first thing to say is that we definitely didn't cheat. There was times on set where my gaffer Vinnie Curtis would say to me, "Look, we've got a couple of 2x1s on the van, still Geminis, but a couple of 2x1s. Let's roll them out and it just make our lives easier and quicker." And for scenes where we thought, you know, we didn't have time to rig the 4x yokes or whatever it may be, but I absolutely never let him take them off the van, and we never used them. So first things to say is that yeah, we did manage to stick to that brief. On the brief itself, you're absolutely right. It was daunting. It was a little bit overwhelming at first, and I actually said to Michael, I was like, that's cool. Yeah, we can make sure that when the lights are in shot and things like that we only show the 1x's, but you're cool for me to have like some HMIs and a nice big booklight off to one side and things like that. Like I said, that's cool, right? And the guys at Litepanels just like, no, this is about the 1x1s. And then I sort of left that cool a little bit. And I was like, I guess I was a little bit, at first I was a bit gutted because I was like, damn, I've got this really cool idea. Like we can make this like super cool action movie. I mean, that's what it is. It's a childhood dream to make an action movie. So that's why I went and came up with that concept with my mate Rami from G6 Mocha, who we did that with. We came up with the creative together, me and Rami. But after that initial sort of like being a bit gutted at the fact that we couldn't use other things, I then actually got really excited about it, and then I sort of got my teeth into the fact that no, this is going to be super cool. It's going to be something that is a really high-end action movie that with lots of fun toys that we're going to try and pull off the impossible. Really, we kept on making our lives harder and harder for ourselves with the introduction of certain things. So, you know, we had 2 motion control robots, we had tracking vehicles, we had lights rigged up lampposts, we had lights rigged on the tracking vehicle, we had fight scenes, we had phantoms, we had all sorts of things that we just kept on adding to the mix to make it harder and harder. But equally, it was like, no, we're going to make this work, and we're going to really, really put this light to the test, like put it through its paces.
Nice, and it's great to hear that you were able to stick to the brief. And if you hadn't, we would have known, Joe, and we would have found out. And you can't lie to us, so it would have come out in the wash anyway.
Absolutely.
But anyway, let's move on. Let's dig a little bit more into some of these setups, right? So one of my favorite ones is the vault scene. So it's quite early on in the film, and I think we've got a still from the shoot up on, yes, right there. So if you look closely at that setup, it's your setup, Joe. You probably don't need to look too closely. But what we've got going on there is we've got a ring of 1x1 hards with the dome diffuser on, and you can't quite see it there, but actually there was one in the center there which didn't have any diffusion on whatsoever. You'd left it completely raw. And I think at first people were thinking, you know, obviously there's a mistake. We've run out of diffusers, something like that. Why wouldn't you just have, you know, diffusion of all of them? So, but with that setup, what kind of aesthetic were you trying to achieve there?
So I even spoke to you guys about this in the brief. I was like, I really wanted to do like a really big, toppy, soft source from above. And then my idea grew and grew. And I remember saying to you guys, like, is it cool for me like to use like some Corex and make this sort of like skirt and things? And you're like, cool, if that's what you'd use, like use it as long as it's got our lamps in it. So we rigged the corridor scene where he's walking down the corridor before this scene, and whilst my Sparks electricians were rigging that, I had Vinny, my gaffer, start to rig this contraption that we made sort of with scaff bars that he'd made sort of like a star out of, and then I think we end up having nine of the 1x all around it. And I just thought it'd be really cool if we can get away with just using this one source. And there was a number of different reasons for that. But one thing that I got really excited about is that because we have the briefcase on top of that plinth, is that I thought it'd be really nice to have like a really hard central source that gives us a bit more of a definitive shadow on the briefcase itself. But then we also get that lovely sort of like ambient soft level of source all around. And actually what I ended up doing was like hoisting the skirt up just a little bit. So we got the fall off on the walls, on the back wall and on the side wall. And we got all of the shape on the table, and we got the shape on the briefcase that we wanted. We even got a little bit of bounce back into the main hero guy's helmet. And it sort of did everything that I want. And then of course we were able to wirelessly control that. So it's the thing where he sort of like picks it up, it changes, we change like the hue of the lamps, and then the robot sort of comes to life. And then when the robot realizes something's gone and it gives us this little head tilt, then we're into like that full alarm mode. So it's beautiful to be able to play with, you know, have that RGBWW sort of source up there, but also having the lights rigged in different ways as well, so I could use them slightly. Yeah, you can see the hard shadow there right in the middle.
Yeah, it's perfect. You see the sharpness around the bottom like that, can't you? But then just
exactly
like really smooth, cool ambient light just falling off to the sides.
Do you know what? It's funny because I was thinking on my just before this call, I was thinking about this scene, and I thought, what would I use, like, you know, if I didn't have 10 of those 1x, like what would I go back to using now? What would I, do you know what I mean? What would I have used before I knew about this lamp or whatever? And it's so it's interesting to now think backwards like that, because after those sort of 4 days on set with the 1x, like 20 of them, I was I've sort of come to rely on them somewhat.
But the answer is you can't go back, Joe. That's it. You know, now you've experienced this. There's no other option. So, the decision is made for you.
I've only got 2 of them though, not 20.
Right.
So I need 18 more, and then that could be my lighting truck from now on.
Yeah.
There you go. And I see that, you know, there's another light in the behind the scenes that's, you know, kind of creating that beautiful, subtle little light on the briefcase. What are you using there? I'm trying to catch you in case. Are
you talking about this one on the right hand side?
Yeah, with the softbox.
Yeah, with the softbox. So what that's actually doing, that's actually pointing back to when we were when we positioned our hero talent slightly further away. When he walks away, he thinks got away with it, and then he looks back. We just gave him like this little softy sort of 3/4 fronty or backy, depending on which way he's looking, sort of key, and that was it. And again, I remember, like, I mean, Vinny, my gaffer, has worked with me a long time. He knows what I like and how I like it. But I remember him saying, "Do you want something like a little bit of fill on the other side?" I was like, "No, that's cool. Just like let it fall off." And I mean, I remember seeing one of the comments on Litepanels that said, "A light commercial shot in the dark," and I was like, "Yes, that's me." But yeah, it's I loved it. But yes, that's it. That was the only other light we used in that setup.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on to the next sequence. So the next one is the fight scene, the martial arts thing. So and this is all about high frame rates. This is where you wield in the big guns. The Phantom Flex turned up, and at this point here, you've got this fantastic rollover shot here. I mean, what frame rate are you shooting at for that shot? And also, because I have to ask, and to really labor a point, was there any flicker?
Of course, there was no flicker. I was never worried about that. There was no flicker. Like that was
a good setup though, wasn't it? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I'll just talk through that setup. And again, again, being brutally honest, I had sleepless nights about that setup because we were on location. We weren't in the studio. I'd recce'd it once. I'd had a look around, and even on the recce, I thought, well, this is kind of not possible with what I want to do and how I want to light it. But again, we constructed a sort of box truss goalpost over to one side, and then we armed 10-foot rods of scaff out, and we managed to rig from above, I think 14 or 16 1x1 hards. And one of my reasons for sort of having those sleepless nights was because although I'd seen the light, I'd never tested the light on set or anything like that, and I was just worried that I might not get enough source for the 1,000 frames, and I was worried about that changing between 25 frames per second and going up to 1,000 frames per second, and the amount we had to get through, and the fact that I wanted to, you know, shoot on red and then go to the Phantom, and how quick that changeover would be, and how much more I'd have to rig, and how much more source I would actually need. but honestly, it was unreal to have all of those, effectively a ceiling of lighting from above, and I had sort of like every other one with the egg crate giving me a bit more of a directional source, and then some of them, the other ones were sort of like had the little bubble in it, and that was giving me my sort of ambient level in the space. But genuinely, we sort of dimmed them down so much. Like they were giving so much source that we hardly needed anything. We backed everything right off, and then for the phantom shot at 1,000 frames, we probably could have shot at, well, I dread to think what frame rate we could have gone up to, but it was like we had source in abundance. We were not shy of the amount of light coming from above. And then I did have like a 4x quad that I was like rolling in for certain scenes, but again, it was dimmed right down. I didn't need loads of it. And obviously the beautiful thing, there we go. Yeah, I used it maybe in that one scene just to get a little something in his visor of like the flashing of the alarm or whatever. And there you can see on that shot where the egg crates are used and where the bubbles are used and things like that. And you can see my dodgy rig as well. But it worked. Yeah, and then of course, like for that phantom shot, it was working again with Rami on his robot, and to achieve that sort of like 360 roll. And we wanted the sort of briefcase to be the hero and things. And yeah, I think it's turned out really nicely. And obviously, like being on location there, we didn't actually get a generator in. We were just using the 13 amp plugs that were there in that sort of like office reception, I think it was, and that was it. That's all we needed. So yeah, that was great.
Tim, we've got that quad up there. I know you're a huge champion of that quad as well. So maybe just take a couple of seconds for you to talk about why you love the quad quite so much.
Well, I mean, I think the quad, just with the amount of output that, you're able to get, and here you are kind of underestimating what that was able to do, and it ended up being too much for you. So I mean, it's great that it's a bright light that only when you combine it all uses 800 watts, and you're getting all of that output, and for something that you thought you would really need some big heavy hitters, you were kind of fine with what you already had. So I'm actually curious, now that you know what that thing can do, how you would maybe in the future use something like the quad, because not only is it bright and powerful, but it's a large source to start with, and I think that gives it some unique quality.
I mean, there's lots of things I'd use it for, but like I mean, just the thing that springs to mind straight away is like what you could do with that and a book light, and to have an RGBWW like book light into, you put that quad, which creates a big source, and put it into like a big 12 by or 20 by even, and then like come back through a nice grid cloth, and you're going to suddenly get this amazing amount of level. And if you wanted to shoot something at, on the Alexa Mini at 200 frames per second, and you wanted that as your key, like that would definitely give you enough. And like to be able to do that in sodium vapor or whatever you wanted to do, like with that, it's just so quick to use that, and and again, going back to the power thing, like traditionally, I don't know, chucking some HMIs up there. Okay, we're using a couple of M40s into this bounce or whatever, right? We need to think about power. We need to think about space. We need to think about rigging. And when you've got something as simple and as lightweight and as not power hungry like that, it's really sort of like revolutionized my thinking really on set, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, especially, like you think about, okay, max output and the fact that it can be so bright and the benefits of that. But, it's been really interesting for me to hear from you how it's also the range, how you can still get these fixtures to be at a very, very low light level for when you don't all that output, and you don't have to go through, basically a full lighting change to go from one camera to the next, or even one scene to the next sometimes. And that's really interesting that you were able to really take advantage of all of that. I
mean, another thing to note is obviously we were lucky enough to have the batteries and the battery packs and things like that to work with, and there was times where obviously all of those ones above are hardwired and powered. And I think the quad was in this scenario as well. But I definitely had like a couple of them just floating around on batteries, and there was a shot like that shot of the briefcase. I literally just chucked one underneath the briefcase, and it just gave it like a little shimmer as it came past, just to lift underneath it. And there you go. You can see it there doing its thing perfectly, and it's just picking out that little corner. And like to be able to work it that quickly, whereas like ordinarily, like if I'm not directing and I'm just DPing, I'm sort of like constantly trying to buy those few seconds off the director. I just want to do like a little tweak, and the director is just saying, no, it's cool, it's like, it's looking good. I'm like, yeah, but I can just see something slightly better. We can just like manipulate that slightly, and to have that sort of flexibility is really beautiful.
Excellent. So let's move on to the next scene. This is where our protagonist is now moving back onto his bike, and forget about Hollywood glamour. This is the outskirts of Manchester in February, and it was cold. So we've got a disused dual carriageway, and you're probably at what, 1 in the morning here, 2 in the morning.
At least.
I mean, just walk us through this. Walk us through, how you've ended up here, Joe.
So this was crazy, and again, like I had to sell in motorbikes because I come from a massive biking family, and we love our bikes. So I've grown up with them. So to be able to shoot one with a tracking vehicle at night with a guy in a blacked out visor is pretty cool. So I thought, yeah, let's do that. Also a hard thing to light potentially. So yeah, Rami and Zach, the producer, found this sort of disused dual carriageway on the outskirts of Manchester. We'd done a whole day shoot in the studio, and then we planned to get there nice and early and rig in the daytime. But of course, as we all know, on set things overrun and whatever, and then we had to basically go and do a night shoot. But we got there. It was dark. It was cold. People were tired. It'd been a long week, and I had my electricians basically rig these, our 1x1s, you can see one there, up these lampposts that didn't actually have tops on, so they didn't have lights on top of the lampposts, which was just insane. So I remember getting there like with Rami and saying like, this is amazing. He's like, yeah, that's cool, but how are you going to light it? I was like, well, we're going to put the 1x up there. He's like, I was like, no, we're going to put the 1x up there. They're going to be like our like in-shot practicals. And he was like, cool, if you think you can do that. And we did that, and we had about 12 of them rigged. And there's some epic BTS shots of, you can just sort of like see the curvature of the road, and this, like, we set them to sodium vapor and they're battery powered, and it's just insane. I think we whipped out all the diffusion off of them, and we just had them hard and direct, and they were giving me so much source. I was at like 50 frames. I was on the red Gemini, so I was based at 3200, just because I could be. I didn't necessarily need to be. And I was shooting 50 foots, and I was getting like a 1.5 stops or something. And I think my lenses were like 1.9 or 2.2 or something. And I always like to shoot a stop or two under anyway. So I was like, I had, again, bundles of source, and that was all we used, like for lots of it. Yes, I did rig some to the tracking vehicle, but not for the reason that I needed to lift the ambient or anything like that. That was to get like reflections in the visor for the chase scene or whatever it may be. Whereas I remember before, even I had thought, I can also like cheat some and hide some along the sort of grass line there, and we can just fire them across the road, and that'll enhance it, but from underneath, and that'll look cool. But I didn't need to, so I kept it really authentic. And for me, the lights really look like street lights as well, and especially at the pace that we're working at, and it's speeding through. And again, going back to what I was thinking before, like what would I have used pre 1x1 hard to rig up there? Like I don't know, would I have used like some 1K Fresnels, or would I have used, I don't know, like I hadn't thought about it again. But this was just like the perfect thing, and to be able to just go, okay, cool, we're dialing, that color, that intensity, chuck it on battery, and it'll last up there for a few hours, and give me that much sort of intense pool of light. It was perfect.
Well, it couldn't have been better set up as well, as they literally didn't have the tops on them. So it was great location scouting as well.
It really was, it really was, like, perfect.
But Tim, there's another point that we've spoken about quite a lot, is the idea that people talk about RGB in the way that I've got behind me, you've got next to you right now. It's all about big saturated colors. But actually, I think a lot of the real benefit of RGB that is perhaps not even appreciated just yet is that actually it helps you match practical white sources as well, a range of white sources more accurately.
Yeah, I mean, you really had such a beautiful color palette, but with the exception of kind of the red emergency lights, it's all within various forms of white light that you use within the shoot. And I mean, being able to have a punchy light that could replicate a street lamp and be on battery and give you that full range of RGB, I mean, that I can only imagine what kind of time that saved you. I mean, you talked about what you would use. I mean, I'm curious how you would schedule your crew and your shoot if you didn't have something like this to have to light a whole street that way.
For sure. And then obviously there's the power draw issue as well, like out on location and all those things. So it just worked it did work on so many levels.
And to your point, Tim, I think actually, in terms of what you achieved, Joe, and your team achieved in such a small amount of time, I mean, you were pushed to the limit. You were the walking dead by the end, right? There was nothing left of any of you. And you were shooting for 4 days solid, day and night. And you were really only able to achieve that because you had saved so much time, because you weren't moving through multiple different light sources. You weren't having to get another light out the truck. You weren't having to worry about lots of different power options or anything like that.
I mean, absolutely. I don't want to use the word, but it actually became easy. It was actually like a bit of a joy. But as soon as I knew what the lights could do and how I was going to use them, and the different, like the amount of levels that I could use them, and the versatility that the light had, it genuinely became easy. It was like, okay, I need a little, a 3/4 fronty key here. I want a little tickle there. I want something over the top there. I want something hard in the background there. And it was just easy. It was a joy. It was actually a joy, and it was nice it took me a day probably to get my head around it, or half a day to think about, right, okay, what can these do and why can they do it? But then after that, I think I've mentioned to you before, Michael, but like going on to my next set and like not having 20 of them in the truck and then having to go back to more traditional methods of lighting. Actually, that was then the issue. My head was like, oh, okay, right. No, we need to do this. Oh yeah, we need to run all that cabling that way. Oh yeah, we need some power here. We need like a big directional source there. And I need to cut that here and I need to bounce that there. It was, so yeah, it really is. I don't know. Again, we chatted about that thing of it being a light for the videographer versus the light for the cinematographer sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, people probably call me a videographer, but as a cinematographer, I would say like I'd absolutely like have it on my set, and like on all my sets, I'd love to have just a few of them in the locker to pull out. And I mean, I messaged you afterwards about that short film I was doing. I was like, look, any chance of a couple of one-bys, because I was thinking, like, I can't think how else I'm going to do this in the time that I've got to do it. And it was the perfect lamp for me to use.
Well, it sounds like you need to put in an order to Litepanels, I would say.
I know. If only I could get some discount.
So let's move on to the final setup. Last one I want to look at is as the protagonist, he re-enters the shutter door, and then we have that classic contra zoom on his face just before the twist. So this is the setup you first talked about after the shoot, because as you said, it really, really demonstrated the Gemini 1x1 Hard's versatility. You can see the main edit on the screen, but it's quite difficult to take in the nuances of the lighting in that short clip. So do you want to explain the different elements that are going all in this one scene here?
Again, so this is probably one of the last scenes before the street scene that I actually lit with the 1x1. And at this point, like I said to you, it was just easy. So we've got like this, the octadome overhead, giving us that really nice, soft, toppy light, which is giving him that lovely sort of like top, sort of like backy key, toppy key, but also like giving us the bike sort of key as well. And then I've got here, he's got like a 3/4 fronty key used just from a snap bag, just chucked up with a snap bag on it. And then we've got one on the floor to the left that's just giving the bike a little lift, like just through an egg crate. And then in the far side, like up on the mezzanine area through that balcony, I remember just saying to Vinny, like, just chuck one up there and let's see if we can get some interest in the back. Like, even at this point, I'm thinking, it's probably not going to quite do what we want it to do, but let's chuck it up and see what it does. And he just whipped out the diffuser and he popped it up about 15 meters away from where that, maybe not that, maybe like 10 meters away from where that balcony is. And he popped it through, and it was cool. It did that. And I remember like Arthur, my co-director, came back and I don't know, he'd been outside or whatever, and he came back and he was like, oh, right, so what have you used up there then? I was like, that's a 1x, and it's just a 1x, obviously. And he's like, I was like, he physically went to go and have a look at it because he didn't believe that we'd still only done that. Yeah, so that shows it. We're using it in 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways, and it's doing everything we need it to do in that scene. It's perfect.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, that has to be a point source. Like, how could you get such a nice crisp shadow off of that? Pretty impressive.
And it's not even that far away. That's the thing. It's not miles and miles away from it. So yeah.
So what would you have used previously to achieve that kind of thing then?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, you'd use something super directional, whether it be like a Source 4 or a Joker bug or whatever it may be, but something directional and hard as you can get, as hard as you can afford to, you know, to get off the truck or whatever. And it's and it would do the same thing, like, or sort of something similar, but again, we can be like, okay, cool, we want that 3700 Kelvin or whatever it may be, and that's it. We're dialed into the rest of the scene. You're not like gelling stuff up and all you know, running cable miles or whatever. So yeah, it's great.
I really like the contrast of you know, having that hard light with the banister there, but also you've got that wonderful octa above that you mentioned a second ago as well. You use a range of different modifiers throughout this as well. But those big, I think that's a 5-foot octa, isn't it? Maybe
that blew my mind. That we use that in the opening shot with the when the robot comes around the motorbike, and we quite literally had like a wall of the 1x1s on box truss that sort of flick on as he's walking through or whatever. But for the actual main bit where it's just the motorbike, we just had this toppy soft sauce, and I was like, wow, that is like super soft. I wasn't quite expecting that. So yeah, that thing of like, you know, having traditionally getting like a massive octane or whatever it may be, and having a specific light to do that for your, even if you're using it for your key for fashion stuff over the top of the camera or whatever, like to have something like that can be so hard but yet so soft in a different setup with a different modifier is really impressive.
So when we're talking about accessories, we go through and the film ends with that fantastic set build where you have that, exactly that one, where you've just got, I think you mentioned that you had nearly all 20 in that set, in some way, shape or form. You're going through massive, 6x6s and octas and then bouncing off stuff and just hidden away in absolutely everything. I mean, you've used it as a soft light, you've used it as a hard light, you used it RGB, you've used effects, you've used large diffusion. I mean, again, it's going to sound like a loaded question because it is. Do you think that the Gemini 1x1 hard has it changed your approach to lighting?
100%. And I categorically have started to think differently about lighting, and it's really funny because it's quite often now the lamp that springs to mind for a number of different reasons, which is why I had to get a couple of them myself, and I'll probably get a couple more, because it can be used in so many different ways, because it is so versatile and because it is so quick. It's basically everything you need on set, really. Like we all know there is never any time on set. There's, you're always an hour behind on best case scenario. So anything you can do to nab some time and to grab some time back, if it's not cutting a bit of gel to put over that lamp, or if it's not getting another bigger source out to give you a harder bit of shape or whatever it may be, it's so useful to have something that you can just sort of whip around and use in so many different ways. So yeah, for me, it's definitely changed my thinking for sure.
No, that's great. And look, we've had lots of conversations about this. I never get tired of talking about this. It was so much fun to work with you on it as well. And thanks again for taking more time to talk about it. Tim, we've got a few questions I think that have come through. But Tim, I don't know if you have any specific ones yourself first.
Well, I'm kind of curious. You kept talking about like what you would go back to and how you would light this scene in the past and wanting more of these on your trucks. I mean, without having to name names and brands, but just like types of fixtures that, you have been tied to traditionally that you would be able to replace on your truck and not need to use for the benefit of the versatility, especially thinking, some of the technology that's been around for a while. I mean, how would you kind of work this into your truck and what ways going forward, if you had a full arsenal of, let's say at least half a dozen or so at your disposal, where would you see that fitting into your workflow?
I mean, it's a great question. I think that obviously HMI and tungsten are not going to be replaced on set for a number of reasons, and I wouldn't want them replaced on set. There's obviously the time and the place that I would obviously I use them most days. So it's that's something that I'm not saying, oh yeah, I would like suddenly now like just a load of 1x1 RGB fixtures that to totally kick out all the old school methods that I've been using and come into that sort of LED world. But for me, I think it's that more about that LED panel world, whereas you might have traditionally I don't know, I'll just name names for the sake of name names, but like an S30 to do something, and then like an S60 to do something for you. Like you might have an Astra to do something for you versus a 2x1 Gemini to do something different for you. And I think what I love about this is that if I am going to go down that sort of LED route, or if I need that RGB option, then this is a very good lamp to have there because of its versatility. I've sort of got aspirations God, you know, yeah, I'll say it anyway, but yeah, I was not really told anyone, but I have aspirations of sort of like opening a studio. And in my mind, I was thinking what would be really super cool would be to rig like my entire grid from above with these sort of like 1-bys or the 2-bys if they ever come. You never know, like see what happens. But like to have all of those like overhead and then like into a desk or whatever, and just to be able to sort of like give your studio over to you know, to your clients or whatever, or for use yourself, and be like, cool, so we've got a white cove, but here it is pink, or here it is green, or here it is whatever. And you know, whatever you need to do, it's all up there, and we can drop stuff down, and it can all be done like this. And you know, I'm sure there's people doing that in a number of different ways, but I feel like this would be a really exciting lamp to use for that reason as well. So yeah.
All right, yeah, and all you would, you know, you can get different, you know, quality and shape of light by swapping out the modifiers and accessories. So I can see how that's really useful. And that actually brings to a question that we have, which is, are the Gemini 1x1 soft accessories compatible with the Gemini 1x1 hard?
Which of course they all are. Yeah, absolutely. It's all the same form factor. So if you use the ones that clip into the front or slide into the rails or bolt onto the yoke, you know, whatever you've been using previously on your 1x1 soft, you can now fit them to your new 1x1 hard as well. No problem whatsoever. And there's a couple more product focused ones as well. Is there a clear diffusion panel to protect the lenses when used as a hard light? We get asked this quite a lot actually, but no is the answer, because the lens is already made of impact resistant polycarbonate. So you know, obviously that, you know, you've got to take care of them, but they're not fragile. They're not exposed bare LEDs, which obviously are much more fragile. There is effectively, you know, a layer of protection there built into the lenses. And I think you touched on it earlier, Joe. Which cameras were you using as well?
So we shot on red. We had 2 of the Komodos and 2 Geminis. So I had like a mixture of both, because obviously we did quite a high-end behind the scenes film to supplement what we were doing with the actual films, but we sort of mismatched between. So I used the Gemini and the Komodo in the end.
Excellent. All right, let me just double check, see if there's anything else. Okay, so I've got one more. I've lost it. Right. Given the whole piece was focused on low light, which can always throw challenges, of course, was there a scene or a moment which you thought would not have been as effective without the light panel products?
I mean, I feel like I was able to make it work for all of those scenes, so that doesn't, which doesn't really answer the question. But I guess, like I mentioned earlier, my biggest sort of headache lying awake at night thinking about it was that scene in the reception, and wondering whether we'd have enough source for 1,000 frames on the Phantom. And not just having enough source, you know, it's easy to light something for 1,000 frames per second if you want to light it badly, but to light it well and to light it in a way that actually matches in with the 25 frames per second. So that was my biggest sort of challenge, I guess, or would have been my biggest challenge, but actually it wasn't a challenge. So I thought it was going to be really hard.
You can maintain that consistency throughout.
That thing of maintaining the same aesthetic and the low light look, whilst having to have a lot of source in order to be able to shoot the 1,000 frames, I guess.
Because we all know that, like, 3 different light sources, 5600K is slightly different between them as well. And you suddenly brought in a brand new light source for your 1,000 frames, but you've got to do 5600K and it's slightly off. You suddenly got some work to do in post, or you're trying to figure it out there, and then whereas
they're shaping it. Exactly, and they're shaping it as well. And it's like, you know, use those windows there and suddenly put some big sources through there and give yourself this, the blue moonlight or whatever to raise the ambient in the room, and suddenly the feel is all wrong and all different. Yeah. So it's definitely conversations I had with Vinny before about like how we're going to do this. So we sort of decided that we'd light for 1,000 frames and then we'd bring it down for the 25 frames, but actually we didn't really have the time to do that. So we ended up shooting the first stuff first at 25. So we shot that and lit that for that. And then I was able just to dial stuff up a little bit where I needed to. So in that regard, it made things really easy.
Okay, we've got another one come through. For Joe, would you use a color meter to balance lights for drama, matching skin tones, etc.? How accurately can you match either degrees Kelvin or not sure what that is, but yeah, how accurately can you match the degrees Kelvin, and how do you do the color balancing for matching skin tones? What's your process there? So
to be perfectly honest, I really lean into digital cameras nowadays, and I really trust my monitoring. So I do use a light meter, but I don't use a color meter. I trust my eye. Whether that's the right or wrong thing to do, but if I think something looks a bit green or a bit off or whatever, then I have something like changed out. But generally speaking, I know my monitor really well, and I know what it's telling me is truthful, and it comes on every camera with me. Whatever it is, it's always the same monitor. So yeah, to be perfectly honest, I look at Rec 709, and yes, obviously I'll check stuff back with a DIT or whatever, and check, I always like to have a little look at one of the first cards in the morning just to check we're in a nice place. But yeah, it's not really let me down. So no, I don't walk around with a color meter and check all the sources now.
And this is what we see quite a lot. There's such variation in the customers that we talk to and the DPs and the gaffers that we talk to, that there will be some guys that will absolutely they'll meter everything and be super precise and specific about it, and other guys like yourself that will just get on set, they'll eyeball it and then say that's right as well, and it's like neither is right nor wrong, it's just your own methodology behind.
No, absolutely. And there's times where I'll get my light meter out in the first scene and then I won't get it out again for the rest of the day, but that's because I feel like then I'm tuned in to where I'm at, or I'll get my light meter out and it'll be doing I'll be like, oh, 2.8, cool, that's what I thought, and that's what I'm already set to on the camera. So it's like actually I don't need to keep on checking where I'm at on every source or whatever, because actually I do just trust my eye and I trust my false color and things like that. So
yeah. We've got another one. What monitor are you using?
A 503 ultra bright.
Okay. And one more. Can you lock a few Gemini 1x1 together to make one source? Yes, of course. Oh, Tim looks like he wants to talk about this.
My favorite subject. I love the arrays. So that quad is actually 4 single units that have been, pulled out of their yokes and assembled into a quad yoke, which we sell as its own SKU. We also have a dual yoke, so you can make a 2x1 out of them, and it's pretty easy to just unscrew the yoke and slide it out of that rail. And we even have mounting points on the back of the fixtures, and we've had people build kind of walls of up to 50 of them together, rigged up on something. So there's a lot that you can do in terms of ganging them together and making modular arrays. And you have the ability to either individually control them or set them to a master replica mode, so that you can control the quad as if it's just one unit, or again go back and take advantage of the separate zones. So a lot of ways that you can take advantage of building and scaling up this fixture.
Okay, that's great. I think we're all good for the questions. So thank you everyone that wrote in with those questions. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Tim, as well. Been a lot of fun. Like I said, always enjoy this, and here's hoping we can do some more in the future at some point.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. All right, thanks, guys. So we're now going to show the full 90 seconds behind the scenes edit at the end. So please, everyone that's still watching, please stay around to watch that if you haven't seen it already. So yeah, all I have left to say is thank you everyone for joining us. The 1x1 hard is now available from all Litepanels partners. So go and check it out.